There have been a lot of books written about the Holocaust, about the Second World War, about the fate of the Jewish people. Now, some of them useful, some of them superb, some utterly redundant, even exploiting the issue, I think. Village of Secrets, Defying the Nazis in Vichy, France. It's a slightly different approach. It talks, obviously, about saving Jewish people, but also about why people resist, why they are defiant, why they're so incredibly courageous, risking everything. I've asked myself the question, if I don't know, an Italian or a French family came to me and said, well, would you hide us? And if I did, not only me, but my entire family could be shot dead, would I do it? I'm sure I'd give them some food and money, but would I actually hide them? It's a question I think we should all ask ourselves before we judge. Caroline Moorhead, the author, is here. Compelling. I really enjoyed the book very much. France is ambivalent, isn't it? Because on the one hand, Jewish people were saved. On the other, sometimes the French didn't act in the most exemplary manner.
No, not at all. They often didn't. One has to remember that it was the French, the Vichy French, who went ahead of the demands for the Germans. Yeah. They anticipated their demands. They set up the camps before they had to.
My golly. And rounded up Jewish children, or when the Germans said, we haven't asked for them yet. Is that true?
That's absolutely true.
Good Lord.
What they did, they made a sort of Faustian pact. They said to the Germans, if you will lay off our French Jews, we will give you our foreign Jews. And in the 30s, thousands and thousands of people, Jewish people, had come to France to take refuge, and they were very happy to hand them over.
What about those who'd served in the French army during the First World War? They were given a little bit of time before they were handed over?
But in the end, they were handed over.
Yeah, incredible. And for those who don't know, this is Vichy France, the collaborationist part of France. There was occupied France as well. This is about one particular village that I'd heard of, but I didn't know very much about. An entire village that sheltered and saved French Jews.
Well, it was more than just one village. It was a whole collection of villages on a plateau. So the title, in fact, is a slight misnomer. It should be Villages of Secrets.
Right.
And it was a whole lot of different people, for different reasons, being imaginative and being brave.
Right.
And simply deciding that they were not going to go along with Vichy.
Why, though?
I think for dozens of different reasons. I mean, there's always been a tendency to try and make it out to have only been for one reason, a sort of conspiracy of good. In fact, it had a lot to do with the area. This was where the Huguenots had gone during the Wars of Religion.
Right.
And also this very strange sect called the Darbiste, sort of halfway between Amish and Quakers.
Good Lord.
And their philosophy, their ethos, their religion said you had to save other people, especially Jews, before you could go to heaven yourself. So they were very involved with it. It was a very remote place, hard to get to, up in the mountains. You know, not many people went there. And because before the war it had become a sort of slight place where sick children were sent, there were a lot of little pensions and homes, so there were places for people to go.
French Protestants, Huguenots, have always felt slightly un-French, un-Gallic. I mean, maybe they haven't felt that. The French have made them feel it. Even post-Catholic France, as we have today, they're outsiders. Was that part of the equation, that they thought maybe they would be next?
No, I think it was that they rather set themselves up against the Catholic hierarchy, who notably went along with Vichy. They were pleased about Pétain's attempt to make France a more moral country, the Catholics. And the Catholic prelates grouped around Pétain. And the Protestants, the hierarchy, there's less of a hierarchical system among the Protestants. And there was this very brave man called Bergner, who was an extremely interesting figure. And it was really the individual pastors. And in the case of the Catholics, some individual priests.
Yeah, of course. I've heard stories, I've met people who were sheltered during the war in Italy, more than France, and the local German military, not the SS, but they knew. And they turned, I mean, I heard a story, it was quite chilling of her. She was a little girl at the time, she was on the balcony putting out the washing. They lived with a French priest. And a soldier walked past, a German soldier, and said, I know you can understand me, because you speak Yiddish, right?
Yes.
And she obviously went cold. And he said, I'm an Austrian, I'm a Catholic, I hate, and he used a swear word, I won't tell anyone. And he didn't. And those stories, I don't know, they make it seem so real, so human, so immediate.
In the village of Chambon, there was a convalescent home for German soldiers who'd come from the East. And I went round the village quite recently with woman who was a little girl there, and she took me to the house that her father had run as a children's home, most of the children there being Jewish. And we're talking about 1943, the sort of height of the deportations. And she took me up to what had been her bedroom, and she pointed to the terrace just below, and she said the Germans were there. And there was no question they knew that this... But they didn't, you know, they weren't Nazis, they weren't the Gestapo. They didn't want to be sent back to the Eastern Front. They just wanted a quiet life.
Is it about Jews and French people, or is it about the human character and what we can all achieve if we're willing to go that extra mile?
Well, I would certainly say that. It's what people do if they choose to have the courage and imagination to do so. I don't think it has anything to do with being Jewish or any other religion.
Yeah. The numbers, how many people were saved in the end?
There's always been this great question. You know, originally, after the war, it was said that 5,000 people had been saved. I think that's wildly inaccurate. I think somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000, which is still a lot of people.
Sure, yes, it is. And after the war, I mean, how long did it take for people to know what had gone on, and were they celebrated and commemorated? Because in some places that just didn't happen.
No, it didn't. I mean, particularly because at the end of the war, when de Gaulle came in, his idea was to put Vichy behind them very quickly and to re-emerge as a strong nation. So that by 1946, the trials had all taken place, and people, a lot of Vichy supporters were amnestied quite quickly.
Yeah.
And there was no appetite for talking about these things. And it was really not until the late 70s. None of these people had these big trials. I mean, the major trials of the French collaborators were not until the 90s. So for years, a sort of gloss was drawn over this. The point about Le Chambon and the plateau was that it became a myth because people were looking for somewhere where they could say, oh, look how well we behaved, and this was so brilliant.
Yeah.
And in 2004, Chirac named Le Chambon as this glorious place where so much good had happened. So what it's had is it sort of put a sort of cover over it all, a rather sanctimonious, sentimental cover, which obscured the fact that a lot of people were saved not by good pacifist Protestants, but by members of the resistance, Maquis, everybody, people with no religion at all. So what was interesting for me was writing about the myth. When I was writing behind the myth, there was this very rich story, which was not a story just about goodness.
Incredible. Village of Secrets, Defying the Nazis in Vichy, France, by Caroline Moorhead, published by Random House. It's my publisher too. They're brilliant. It's a wonderful book. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.